Now, I have to tell you from the get-go that what I'm presenting today is not by any way a finished product. Rather, I'm going to be sharing with you some of those curiosities that inform the upcoming or emerging collaboration with Professor Woodcock. Pointing to situate or locate event spatially somewhere is an inevitable part of communication that is attested across societies. And it has attracted the interest of scholars. And the scholarship in this area is very diverse. We have those who are interested in the axis and dimension of gestures, and those who are interested in correlating temporal linguistic expressions indicating dimension with placement, location of co-occurring gestures. We should be able to separate gesture from the source and from the recipient, sort of making it an independent morphological entity that we can interpret, and we do interpret it. Gestures can also be considered signals that can be intentionally produced and unintentionally produced. Intentional production is, you've seen that, and unintentional production, the static version. This is really interesting. I wish Professor Waldemar is here from Ethiopia. In Hawassa, one of my colleagues said to me when a lady walked by with fronted gap, he looked at me and he said, "That is fire." And I looked, what do you mean fire? Of course, I got out my phone to record him talk. And he goes, "You can't satisfy them, so don't go near him." The point that I'm making is, even the famous Kluger hands of Van Osten achieved great fame by being able to take, to make sense of the cues that are emanating from spectators, and they were given unintentionally. The horse was able to interpret their breathing, their dilated pupils, and through that was able to resolve some of the riddles that were provided to it. Comedians, on the other hand, are sometimes at the forefront of research by being able to take subtle communicative events from our everyday experiences and bring them onto our popular imagination. So you might appreciate this saying from Jerry Seinfeld. It stopped running in the US in 1998, but I know that it has found a home in Germany, even synchronized. I'm going to play a little bit of this clip to you. And what I'm trying to show will be two characters. One produced gestures unintentionally, and another produced gestures intentionally. So whether intentionally produced or unintentionally produced, they are informative. Okay, what do I do? There you go. Sorry.
But Sam, when you go and down to their eyes, just hang, it's allowance. Walks like a ring.
Better call the zoo. I just get the feeling that you're going to meet somebody all the time. So you might want to think about maybe moving your arms a little when you walk. Like arms, sort of swim. Lord. You just keep an eye out for when she's about, I don't know, yay high, and swing her arms when she walks. What the hell is that?
The second character, Raquel Welch, doesn't swing her arm intentionally when she dances, because those are her signature moves. But you can see that the non-swinging of the arm that was unintentionally performed created an office scene. My daughter taught me a word for that. It's called bullying. So gestures, we attribute meaning to them. They are not frivolous, and there is really nothing about them that on closer examination will be discarded. They are really meaningful, and scholars have been interested in understanding what gestures do. What exactly do they do for the gesturer? What is in it for those people who are hearing or who are seeing? And to me, it's important to understand what exactly informs the choice of gesticulation. And quite importantly for me, I'm interested in understanding why that specific gesture and why that specific phrase. This question can be posed universally. However, I presume that the answer can only be culturally. Despite our propensity as human beings to communicate, the overt framing and structuring, and I mean by that, the codification or translation of our everyday experience into abstract communicative system occur culturally, or is a function of language and culture. Luhmann, whose major thought on society underlied the theme of the Auerbach current fellowship, of which I'm a thankful recipient, conceptualizes it as a system of communication. In doing that, he carefully avoids the fundamental question of codification of information, transmission of information, and decoding of that information. I, on the other hand, am closely akin to Austin, who suggested in his very popular work that we use words to do things, and also quite aligned with Roman Jakobson, who said to us, we speak in order to be heard in order to be understood. And at this stage, I will be very remiss if I do not express my appreciation to Thomas, who invited me to be part of this project. I will also be remiss if I do not say a huge thank you to the colleagues at the Auerbach Institute who have done everything possible to make sure that we are well situated. And in the course of that, colleagues who have now become friends. They have welcomed us to their classroom, welcomed us to their spaces, welcomed us to their resources. And for that, I can only say von Herzen vielen Dank. So what exactly is my focus this evening? I will be discussing with you three things. Now, this is really important because there is, as of yet, not any basic description that involves Yoruba system of pointing with respect to time. So we have to do that basic descriptive work before we can build on that. So that will be the very first thing I'm going to try to do. I will try to look at the pointing morphologies and give meanings to them. The second thing that I'm going to try to do will be to show their systematicity and relationship to the linguistic expressions that they co-occur with. And then the third thing will be to involve you in a discussion to understanding whether the Yoruba gestures is a patterned reenactment of cultural shared temporal conceptualization. So goal number one, to try to describe the pointing morphologies in Yoruba and their meaning. To do this, I'll first characterize Yoruba temporal gestures. I show that Yoruba make use of sagittal gestures, whereby temporal references occur along body sagittal front and back axis. Like other cultures, this is not new. Yoruba turns abstract concept of time into an object that can be situated in space. And it has length, it's in motion, and it's along a dimension. And I'm going to provide evidence for all of this. So point number one, like I said, Yoruba linguistic encoding of spatial relations reflect a relative frame of reference. I will be suggesting that the frame of reference is the ego, the speaker, the person. And this is not new, it is attested across various cultures. So in what follows, I'm going to be providing clips and stills from several videos. We can talk about methodology during the discussion if you care for it. To buttress this, we want to understand what is the present for Yoruba, what is now. The phrase to look for is oni or eni, which indicates or translates to today. Today for Yoruba will be the here, the now, what in English grammar we will consider to be the present. If you watch the first image, you see hand is raised and the stroke goes downward. I'm a PC person, so. The year we are in today, you see that motion. The stroke is from up to down. Where the speaker is, that is where the present is. Oni, Oloni, this very day. He is talking about those who have been publishing works on Yoruba history, and that effort, he said, continues or has not stopped up until this very day. And this very day, you watch his hand, again, the stabbing motion is towards his feet. So the present is exactly at the location of the ego. One more evidence for that, or two more. Nísinsìnyí is right now, at this moment. Again, you see that pointing gesture towards the feet of the speaker. And this man is talking about what is going on currently. And the well, all of these have metaphorical expressions attached to them. The lexical representation of that is lower, or is hand, so that which is at hand. What is going on at this moment. So right now that I'm talking, that is what I'm doing, lower, that is what I'm doing right now. So you will see a repetitive stabbing motion towards the feet of the speaker. So the first point that I'm trying to make is to establish what is the present for Yoruba speakers and in their gesture. Where do they place the present? Where do they locate the present? And I've tried to show to you that the presence is egocentric. Now, having established that, where do they locate the future and where do they locate past time? That is now the second thing that I'm going to do. I'd like to call your attention to the words that we are to watch out for. Sorry, I can't find the mouse. Anyway, we're to watch out for Oju, which stands for eyes, and everything before the eyes is Iwaju. So watch out for that or listen for that word, Ju, Iwaju. And anything to the back is Ehin. So we want to understand if they will, when you hear the lexical phrase Iwaju, what and where exactly in space do they place event that is occurring in the future relative to the events occurring in the past? Iwaju stands for progress, stands for future, and Ehin stands for things that have occurred in the past. I'm going to be showing to you with, in what the clips that now follows, that earlier events are situated to the back of the speaker. Yoruba does not mark tense on any lexical item. So it operates aspects, grammatical system. So events are located with particles and situated based on whether they're completed, not completed, hence ongoing, or will occur later on. These three dimensions, because of the meta language we're using, English, comes across as past, present, and future, but that would be a very inadequate translation. However, let it suffice that we will be using that inadequate translation. So aside from that, so when you look, the first sentence there says ni ano. So that's the particle ni, and ano is yesterday. So event located yesterday is then taken to be complete. Ni ola, ola is tomorrow. Event that will occur tomorrow is presumed to be in the future. This woman is talking about things that have happened in the past, the view that people had of female singers in the past. And you're going to watch her, she raises her hand up to her head level, pulls it behind her ears, and then with fingers flaying, makes a gesture to the back. This gesture occurs simultaneously as the word back is being uttered. I don't know why it's not playing. If it had played, the stroke coincides with the phrase and it is motioned towards the back. It might be much more clearer here. At that time, in those days. So he's having conversation with this chief, the young man, and he's going to ask him about his days when he was younger. What was going on in your days when you were younger, in those days when you were younger. Again, you can see from the still, his hand is raised up to the head level, placed behind the ears, and then of course, gestured backwards, repetitively. Ni igbaye, at that time. So each utterance of the temporal reference, igbaye, for each utterance, there is a co-occurring gesture that places or locates that time, and it is to the back. This is a famous pastor. He's recounting his days. He used to be a Muslim, and while he was a Muslim, he said he saw a vision or had a dream, and this occurred some 10 years back. And that is what you're going to see him talk about. So watch his hand when it gets to some 10 years back. So again, the same gesture to the back. So events, therefore, that perfected events that occurred. So the timeline would be in the back. Being an oral society and an agrarian society traditionally, they rely on indefinite placement or record keeping of time in the past. So for undetermined past time, the phrase will be in those days, the days of yonder, days of yore. And this is what he's talking about here. And we will again take a look at where he places his hand when he's talking of these days that have gone by. In those days, again, the same gesture, however, the hand is stretched higher, indicating the length of time that is passed. So what have I done so far? I've shown you that the past time is in the past, the present time is at the location of the ego, and summarily, he gave us a good example of that. Come on, we'll sit down. Sissy. Consider it at that time in reference to now. And I think that summarizes it. So past time, of course, in the back, and present time is right here. The length of arm is indicative of the stretch of time that is being referenced. And I will give you evidence of this as we move along. Of course, there will be individual variations, of course. And there are lots and lots of metaphor of time that correspond to this. And for the interest of time, I'm not going to dwell on metaphor, but I will be willing to engage in discussion of it at the end. Now to the future. The buzzword here will be, again, Ola, tomorrow, event that is yet to occur. And of course, Iwaju, that which is in front of the eyes. So that is the things we want to watch out for. And I'm going to be suggesting that events that are yet to occur are situated in front of the ego, in front of the speaker. She's talking about wedding next month. And you will see she points to the future to show next month. And actually she uses the English phrase, there's kind of code switching here. And before I do my wedding next month. You've seen this young man before and this elderly man in conversation. So the elderly man is trying to suggest that whatever you are going to be doing in the future to gain your livelihood, to gain identity, to gain status. So Irial is being located somewhere in the future. You will see he raised his hand just as it's in the still. The hand is right there all the time with a little bit of nudging to the future as he's talking about things that are yet to occur. The future, that which is yet to occur, he is placing somewhere in front, before the eyes, Iwaju. This is a good summary of this. The young man is complaining about preachers and Nigerians who pray a lot. And he's saying they pray today, and that same prayer tomorrow, that same prayer next week, that same prayer next month. He establishes today, this time on the surface of his palm, but the location is where he is, the gesture is downward. And thereafter, he begins to elevate his hand. And as he stretches it further, longer length of time is indicated. The farthest time is out of the frame. So we have done provided three evidence now to show that the past is in the back, the present is right now, and the future is in front. And this man gives us a very good summary of it again. How was it yesterday in the past? Will it align with today? And how will it be relative to tomorrow? What I've just shown, like I said at the beginning, is not exotic. The majority of cultures use this method. This young lady is a proprietor of a school in Ethiopia. She was a student when I was there. And then when I went back, she had finished. She studied engineering, but now she's the school proprietor. And I walked in and they were having meeting. And, you know, it's kind of interesting when you suddenly see somebody you considered a little girl now being the boss. So I took out my camera so that I can make fun of her at the end. That was my intent. And then I captured some of these movements. So she's talking about today, yesterday, today, past, and in the future, just for entertainment. Oh, it's not moving again. Oh, okay. So let's see. Oh, that is today. You will have done that. Tenant. Long time ago, if it has played, you will see the hand goes like that. Long time ago. That is long time ago. something that will happen in the future. So this is similar. So to summarize what we have done so far, I have tried to show you that the Yoruba people point with exaggerated height to locate entities that are in distant time. The higher the pointing hand, the longer the length of time indicated. The longer the length of time indicated, the more the stroke, the finger snapping, the hand stabbing, or any of the repetitive motions that accompany the utterance. And then there is an underlying motion involved in the passage of time. Goal number 2. In the following, I want to discuss with you the systematicity that is involved and the relationship between the gestures and the verbal equivalents that they co-occur with. A quick note on Yoruba phonology. The system employs duplication or reduplication, we call it. So dara is good or beautiful. And then very beautiful will be dara dara. So you have a repetition or duplication. Kere is small and kekere is very small. So in the first example, the whole morpheme was reduplicated. In the second example, just the first syllable is reduplicated. This, to me, translates to an intensification in the manual gesture area. And it brings to mind a kind of image that is associated with that passage of time. An idiophone quality is present in this usage. Makes kind of the reference they're making very palpable. Gestural duplication, you will see that there is an alignment between verbal repetition, the repetition that is going on in the verbal area with hand motion. This reduplication marks temporal recency, in this case, right now. Lower, lower, so as he duplicates that, linguistically, the gesture duplicated that. Lower, lower. There is a perfect alignment if you go frame by frame between the hand gesture and the utterance. Another example, we've seen this guy talking about the history that has occurred in the past long time. And the phrase of interest here is tefe. Again, an idiophone is conveyed to me, but it is indicative of the length of time that he's talking about. But what I'm interested here is that the hand gesture corresponds, co-occurs, and perfectly timed and aligned with the verbal equivalent. No, unfortunately, it's not showing again. Well, we have other examples. A third one, in those days, long days ago, So we find that as the utterance is duplicated, the gesture is also duplicated. Second excursion, I want to show you this repetitiveness that is found with finger snapping. Again, indicative of length of time. Again, finger snapping. Along with that, I'd like to also talk about anticipation. The gestures or the hand motion seem to be in place or sometimes runs ahead of the verbal equivalent. So he had started snapping before we get to the verbal equivalence, which is here. And then there is a correspondence between the snapping and the phrase that corresponds to the time. And this one is really interesting. Now, watch right here. The hand raises and is suspended right there until the verbal equivalent catches up. See, like waiting for the utterance to catch up with it. So gestures of time in this instance seem to anticipate the verbal equivalent. Our third point, fourth point in this excursion has to do with the co-expressiveness of gesture with speech. In this clip, you'll find hesitation in the verbal utterance, which correlates with gestural hesitancy. So essentially, as the man stutters, his hand stutters with him. So watch his hand, and it's a very short clip. Agba. So as he's searching for words, his hand searches for words. All of these are not new, because thinkers have suggested, like Kendon, who mentioned that both spoken and gestural expressions seem to combine as if they are involved in a single plan of action, that they are coming from somewhere and they only go different routes. And McNeil will invariably suggest that they are unbreakable psycholinguistic units. So what have we done so far? I've tried to suggest to you that speech and gesture are co-timed, that the observed pointing gesture and speech are semantically co-expressive, that the observed gesture strokes anticipate the speech they go along with. So that would be the end of the digression, but that is in response to the second goal. Now, the last goal would be to raise and discuss with you the question of whether Yoruba gestures, so pattern reenactment of culturally shared temporal contextualization. We can't, so to do that, we are particularly interested in asking whether Yoruba's spatial frame of reference influences or reflect a gestural temporal deixis. That cannot be discussed until we understand how Yoruba conceives time. What is the progression of time? And I'm going to be proposing to you that underlying in all of this will be a notion of cyclicity. And this is pervasive in the world sense. In this clip, you're going to see the man talking about as time goes on, and his hand will move like that. The elongated O seem reminiscent of the slow passage of time, but showing the direction in which time is going. In this clip, not very clear, the man presumably is dying, and he's trying to admonish his son about something that might happen in the future. And to do that, he uses the phrase "ti ojoba pori" as days turn and turn and turn. And you're going to see that cyclicity involved in his motion. This will be much more, the next clip will be much more clearer. He's talking about as time goes on, we follow. Again, you see that cyclic motion, and you will see him leaning in and his body gesturing as if you can see him walking behind time. So we are following, we are following. So this has already been noted that most of our understanding of time is a metaphorical version of our understanding of motion in space. Where is the future located for Yoruba people? We've seen evidence that they spatially place the future in front. I'm also going to show you clearly some of the things you missed, that the same future that is spatially placed in front is also placed in the back. So we have bidirectionality. You've seen the word iwaju in front of the eye. And in the olden days, and you've seen the phrase nijonjon to show things that have happened in undetermined past. Now, pay attention to what this man is doing. Siwaju in front. And he's talking of what God must have done at the beginning of time, before now, but he places it siwaju. So what preceded? It would seem then as if for this man, time is coming from the back, passes the ego, and is going ahead. So events that have occurred will be ahead. So niwaju. The same phrase, iwaju, oh, I'm glad I have the still. He is pointing to the back at the same phrase, oshiwaju. So we have bidirectionality in the location of the future. Same concept, different directions. One more evidence. He's talking of this civilization that we have been following and that has been coming. What direction is coming? So their civilization have been proceeding from the time past and then is coming. The same guy, the same speaker, turns around using the same word, Bobo. You have to watch closely the left hand, not the one holding the paper. Stretches it forward and he moves it closer, chopping the years that are approaching, the times that we've been coming along with. The same phrase that was used in the previous clip. Having a different direction. So we see evidence of bidirectionality of the future being expressed gesturally. To me, it is important to know the cultural reference that informs the conceptualization of time as reflected in the temporal deixis that then become synchronously gestured. For those of you who are anthropologists, the understanding is that language is an intimate, has an intimate relationship, or that there is an intimate relationship between language, culture, and thought. This relationship is complex. I'm also persuaded that the relationship of a person to time and to place is reflective of the relationship of a people to whom that person belongs to time and to place. And it is in consonance with the perception of time in space. And this perception is rooted in the world sense. And the world sense, to me, that ties this together is that cyclicity that I've mentioned a while ago that is found in the conceptualization of the movement of time. This cyclicity is like a wheel that is turning around, but it is also being propelled forward. Yoruba world sense sees existence on earth as cyclic. The ultimate reward for a good life is reincarnation. When you have lived and achieved all the good things that the Yoruba prescribed as invaluable to existence, and you live to be an old person and then die, then you get to join the court of ancestors and you have the opportunity to come back. You see that cyclicity involved. within that cyclicity also is reflected in their understanding of season, being an agrarian society traditionally, and the majority up till now, to my mind, are still engaged in agriculture. They find cyclicity in the seasons, the season to plant, the season to reap, the wet season, the dry season. Then there is this cyclicity. But aside from that, the marking of birth in itself and of adulthood and of death also is cyclic, and it revolves around just like the sun. So the metaphor there is that the morning of life, when the sun is rising, that is your youth. And the midday, and actually the phrase is when the sun touches the temple, and that is when your shadow will be under your feet. That will be your prime of life. And then in the evening, and the phrase again is when the sun is setting, that is the old age, when that person is getting ready to turn into bed to sleep and then hopefully join the ancestors and then come back. And then while you're on earth, good things will happen, bad things will happen. When good things happens to you, the phrase that they come up with is that the world faces you. And when bad things happens to you, then they say the world has turned its back to you. And for them, all of this is temporary because it is cyclic, it is revolving. It would seem to me then that this conceptualization of time is fossilized, opaque to people, but that fossilization is captured by gesture. And I'd like to stop there because I'd like to engage you in the discussion, and you are free to go through the several summaries that I have at your leisure. Thank you.